Sitting disease, it's just a fad, right? Not much science behind it. You'd like to see, we see lay newspaper or lay media articles, headlines about it every now and then. And it's very awkward. I mean, it's very difficult. How are you going to stand in an office anyway? Wrong. Wrong and wrong. You can stand in an office. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And there's tons of science about it. And it is very impactful on your health in a negative way. This is just one of many, many articles. Good science comes out on sitting disease and inactivity every couple of months. I'm just going to cover one article today, one that came out in November of 2018 from JAMA. And it looks at the amount of time that we are inactive. You've all heard it. We get up and sit in the car while we drive to work. Then we sit at work all day. We sit at the water cooler. We sit at lunch. We go back and sit at work during the afternoon. Then we sit in the car on the way home. And then we sit for dinner. And that is a major underestimate. This is a great infographic, by the way, and it's free if you want to put it on your web page or make flyers with it. And it's not the only one out there, but just be aware this is a gross underestimate of the amount of time that we spend inactive, because it doesn't even count the 6 to 8 or more hours that we're lying asleep at night. So again, we've got a major problem in this country with inactivity, and sitting disease is a very appropriate term. There's very good science behind showing the very negative impact on our bodies, including not just orthopedic, but biochemical stuff. Again, lipase, which is one of the enzymes, one of the biomarkers of enzymes that breaks down fat. Within less than an hour of sitting, and inactivity begins to decrease in our bloodstream. Now, what do I do personally about it? Well, yes, I've irritated my wife many, many times, encouraging her to stand up as we eat. But I've done some other things as well, and I'm just going to show you something briefly. Don't tell me that that it's expensive to get a standing desk. This is I don't know if you can see this very well. I have no financial ties to this company other than that I've paid them probably a couple of $100 at $25 at the time. This is a standing desk. All you have to do, it's a piece of cardboard, or several pieces of cardboard that come in a box, and it takes you about 15 minutes, less than 10 minutes to assemble it. And if you may have noticed, I don't sit while I do these videos. I'm standing for this very reason, for the science behind the negative impact of sitting. So again, enough of the personal stuff. Let's get back to the article. This was in JAMA, 2018, November. And basically they're looking at the joint prevalence of sitting time and leisure time, physical activity among U.S. adults from 2015 to 2016. We'll talk a little bit more about how they got the data, but let's go straight to the results. Does this hit you hard enough? 51%, over half of us, are basically inactive. If you look at this, there's a couple of ways to read this thing, a couple of things to look at. This is the percentage of people. So you add up all these bars and it adds up to 51%. This is daily sitting time. So this is 0 to less than 4 daily sitting time. The highest bar here is 6 to 8 hours of sitting time, and the darkest bar here is over 8 hours of sitting time. Again, this is not including the time that we're asleep in the bed. So, how did they get this data? Uh, we'll talk about that in just a minute, but let's go a little bit deeper into the results itself. So basically, they looked at 5,923 adults with complete data, over 98% of the total. Over 25% of them report sitting for more than 8 hours per day, and about 45% were inactive. Now, what that means is if you, and it gets back to the title, they're looking at sitting time and leisure time physical activity. So somebody could be here, let me show something else here. This is leisure time physical activity as well. So you may have been like I've been a few times in my life where I had a sitting job, but I still, during leisure time, I'd go out and run a half marathon once a week, do weights, some other things. So that would be a combination of sitting a lot, but not inactive in terms of your leisure time. That would be over here. That would be highly active people who still have significant sitting time during their day. Now, why is that important? Both are very important. If you do have a sitting job and for some reason you really cannot change that sitting job, and I hope that you saw from my little $25 standing desk, that's probably an excuse. If you do sit at work, but you still have a lot of other activity during your leisure time, it does have a very positive impact on your health. It helps, that leisure time activity really helps decrease the negative impact of that sitting all day. But each has a component. So it's the people that do, that have both that are really in bad shape, are really getting a negative impact on their health. So that's why they talk about a combination of leisure time and sitting time. So again, 5,923 adults sitting for more than 8 hours per day, and 44% were inactive. That's inactive leisure time. Across the joint categories, the greatest proportion of adults reported sitting for 6 to 8 hours per day and being inactive. Largest part of the reported groups said, I don't do anything when I'm off work, evenings and weekends, and I sit all day. In other words, they're getting the worst part of sitting disease. The second most common was sitting for more than 8 hours per day and being inactive. So the most common was sitting 6 to 8 hours per day and being inactive. The second most common was sitting 8 hours per day and being inactive. So again, the smallest portion reported sitting for less than 4 hours per day and being sufficiently active. So very few of us are doing, at 2.6%, very few of us are doing what we're supposed to do. And there's an age component. This is even more significant for as we age. For example, the joint prevalence of sitting for more than 8 hours per day and being inactive increased with increasing age. So I'm going to go into a little bit more details about how we, or how they got, I didn't get this, I didn't do this study, how they got the study, how they got the data, and some of the pros and cons of those details. But before I do, just a brief introduction of my channel. My name is Ford Brewer. I started off as an ER doc, learned very quickly that most of the things, diseases, death, and disability that patients bring into the ER are things that should have been prevented. I went to Johns Hopkins to learn preventive medicine, loved it, did well, ended up running the program, and have spent over 30 years since then, after I left Hopkins, helping docs and patients understand how to prevent disease rather than waiting for the disease and hoping for a cure. Because again, if you haven't thought about it, the things that kill us and disable us, like heart attack, stroke, dementia, the cures for those aren't very good. It's very difficult to do what we need to do in terms of appropriate lifestyle, but it's a lot more difficult to try to get a cure. Now back to the methods. How did they get this information in this study? It was they looked at NHANES, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Surveys, from 2015 and 2016. So hopefully we've begun to improve as a population. I think many of us are skeptical, but we will see as NHANES is done, I think, every year. They do samples throughout the U.S. to get an idea of health and nutrition, and they also look at physical activity. So they looked at the overall interview response, and the response rate was 63%. There were 5,992 respondents. So a couple of other things for you guys that tend to doubt and want to think about, okay, what are the pros and cons of the study? Well, there's no question. Very little question, and who's surprised? We're in bad shape in terms of physical activity in this country. About 1 in 4 sit for more than 8 hours a day. 4 in 10 are physically inactive during that leisure time, and 1 in 10 are both. So the limitations of this study include possible bias inherent to self-reported data, in that physical activities shorter than 10 minutes may not have been captured, and those make a big deal. In fact, one of the major countermeasures that you'll see, one of the most common countermeasures you'll see for sitting at work is get up every 10 minutes, walk down the hall, have a conversation. When you look at some of the Mayo YouTubes on this, you'll see those. Like I said before, I still think there are few, if any, valid excuses for not standing at your desk. It's not expensive, and you know what? It makes you tired the first couple of days, but it's good for you. Back to the discussion on the article, both high sedentary behavior and physical inactivity have negative health effects. We know that. We've gotten buried in evidence regarding it. So, evidence-based strategies to reduce sitting time, including increasing physical activity, or both, would potentially benefit most U.S. adults, but particularly older adults. Thank you very much for your interest.